Chapter 7. Grace. When I was 13 and it became obvious to everyone else that I was powerless, which I started running in the morning to bring myself back to life. I suppose I thought in my younger mind that if I ran fast enough I could take flight off the pavement, catch the wind and bring out magical abilities that lay dormant. Now I run because it clears my mind, one foot in front of the other. Everything in life is a step at a time. That's the order of things, the way I can ground myself through anything. I get up before Paige. She's still dead to the world as I'm finding my sneakers, heaving myself out of bed and into the early gray light of dawn. Don't normally run this early, but ever since I arrived at the academy, sleep has been elusive. I get a couple hours at a time and then my brain kicks into overdrive and sends me out of bed in a maddeningly early fit. I'm racing against myself. I've always done my best to hit my personal best times whenever I get out for a run. That's exactly what I'm doing now as I attempt to break my records for my own mile times. I'm starting to learn every bend of the campus, the way the woods curl around it with the massive statures of all the trees. I know which points the sun hits at which hours. Observation is survival as far as I'm concerned. One foot against the other, one step at a time. I end up at the far end of campus at the top of the massive hill that looks down at the front gate and the road that leads you out of here. I don't have to have supernatural senses to know the closed gate is locked. Energy is beating off it to form a protective, well-defined edge of campus. I'd have half a mind to hop it if I thought I could make it. I still don't know how I made it in. Everywhere I go as I watch other students perform magical charms or show off their strengths, I'm reminded of my own alienation, how other I am. How did I even get accepted? What does the campus sense in me? I thought I'd be the only person awake at this hour, but I'm startled to find Professor Frey running in gray sweats, his chest covered in rivulets of sweat that curl the faint hair on his broad chest. I know better than to stare, but he's a lot to look at. Between his 8-pack and the dips of his hips that form a clear V at the band of his pants, he's so hot the warmth in my cheeks falls lower to places I'd rather not consider. He slows down when he sees me, pausing. Grace. Grace. He called me by my first name and not my last. Something about it strikes me in the chest, making my thoughts sputter into incomprehensible gibberish. Hot man. Calling me by my name. Someone shoot me now before I throw myself at him like a blushing maiden. Why are you up so early? He asks. Students shouldn't be roaming campus until sunup. I point at the sun, which is barely breaching the horizon at this point, but is still visible enough to be an excuse for me. I needed to run, so I went out. Don't worry, I avoided the woods and all the wild animals in it. I look knowingly at him, fighting a smirk. During the moon, the wolves are dangerous, but in this form, he's no different than anyone else. I guess we had the same idea, he says, wiping the sweat from his brows. Almost expected a snarky reply, but he doesn't seem to have the energy for one. He's being perfectly civil, actually. I'm not sure how to react to it. I run all the time, I admit. I don't think I'd be able to get through the week without a good jog. The wolf gets quieter when I let him get a workout in, Frey says. Otherwise, I spend the week antsy for a drink and a quick fuck. Well, you know, wolves don't have the same self-control that we do. Call me a wolf then, because I'd like to jump his bones at this moment, and I'm doing everything I can to ignore the thoughts running through my mind. I've never cared all that much for guys, not in an all-consuming way, but there's some sort of magnetism between us that sparks whenever he looks at me. So listen, he says, I have a favor that I require, one of which could help me with. It's rather time-sensitive, and while I know you haven't found your calling, magically speaking, I believe I could shape you as a student and help both of us. Okay, I say slowly. I have no clue what he's getting at, but as long as he's talking, shifting on his feet and flexing the muscles in his hands, I'm going to listen. At this point, I'm invested enough to wonder what could possibly make Professor Frey nervous. He wants my help with something a witch could do? After the conversation we had where I poured my heart out, surely he knows there are more qualified witches at this very school for anything magical he may need done. Why would he be asking me? I don't know the first thing about any of this. If I were in need of assistance, I'd choose me last. I will give you magic lessons about everything from defense to library magic, and in exchange I need you to provide your services in researching werewolves. I want to know about pack bonds. Interesting subject matter. I'm again wondering why he'd ask me for help. Not like I know the first thing about werewolves either. My family has kept themselves away from the magical world for so long, and it doesn't make any sense. I don't know anything worth contributing, but I need magic lessons. Knowing the history of Pacific Academy is a great step in the right direction. However, to really prove myself and hold my place here, I have to earn it with skills with magic beyond walking through the gates. Do or die. That was the purpose of the hazing ritual, and it fucking worked scaring me in the right direction. I hold out my hand for a shake. You've got yourself a deal. He looks down at my outstretched palm warily. Since when does anyone in your generation shake hands? Since now, I say. Come on, shake it. I don't bite. He sighs. He seems to realize wisely that I'm not going to leave him alone until he sucks it up and shakes my hands, which is fine by me. When he takes it, finally, his is firm and soft, sharply contrasting the clammy smallness of mine. He shakes hands with confidence, and I can't fight the thought of what those same hands would feel like on my body. Jesus. Sleepaway camp is turning me into a horny teenager again. I'll race you back to the dining hall, I suggest. Maybe we can have coffee and discuss the agreement further. So I have more specifics about the deal. I don't like going into anything blind. He takes off after me down the hill, and even though his legs are far longer than mine, he's clearly trying to keep up with the pace I'm setting. I can't decide if I find that frustrating or not. Maybe a bit of both. Why werewolf bonds? I ask. He shakes his head. I'm not sure if he's dismissing the question or silently telling me not to pry. I want to be nosy. It's the only way I'm going to get anywhere with him, and I need answers more than I need to walk on eggshells around him. Curiosity, he finally says. I have trouble believing anyone of his position in such an academically esteemed university would need me to help him conduct research. There has to be something deeper than that, some reason he's asking for outside help. Maybe it's his job on the line or an important academic paper. Whatever his reasoning, I want to know it. I may not be a psychic witch, but it doesn't take one to figure out that he's hiding something, or at least evading the truth. Whether it's passively or directly, he's not exactly an open book. Well, you're a smart guy. You can't figure out the Dewey Decimal System. Ask. You need someone to summon books for you? I just need an extra set of eyes, he says. There's a hell of a lot of books to read in a short term. You students aren't the only ones here for a brief time. My access to the library of the academy is limited at best. Somehow, as I'm heaving out my breaths and attempting to keep from sounding utterly exhausted by the run, he's calm and smooth. We could be striding around a park, judging by how he's handling the workout. Figures werewolves don't get tired even in their human forms. The dining hall is in the primary building on campus, just under the clock tower. Breakfast has started, but most everyone won't be down to eat for another hour or two. We're alone, the only two people who can smell the freshly brewed coffee and bacon cooking. I don't think he's going to eat with me. We're not friends, and even if we're working together on a project, he won't tell me the details of I don't know the first thing about him, and he doesn't seem all that enthusiastic about spending time with me. We part ways at the door. I grab my coffee first and a muffin and decide to enjoy them in the comfort of my dorm room, where I can think about his offer and maybe come up with a theory as to why he's asking me. Maybe I should ask Paige. I can feel his eyes on me on the way out. Upstairs in my dorm room, Paige is still sprawled out in the bed, snoring with a puddle of drool plastering her hair to her pillow and the side of her cheek. She doesn't seem fazed by my arrival. I seize the opportunity to take a long shower as the events of the day play inside my mind on a loop until they become as muddled as alphabet soup. Why ask me for help? Why? No matter what excuse I come up with, none of them feels sufficient. None of them quell the concern and confusion that have made a permanent home inside my stomach. When I get out of the shower, Paige's alarm must have gone off because she's sitting upright, holding a note in her hands. Catching my eyes, she holds it up in the morning light, frowning. Whose are? She asks. I reply. I don't know. He left you a note. I assume it's a boy, because his handwriting is awful. It dawns on me what she's talking about, and once I catch on, I'm a bit shaken. Somehow he'd found my dorm and slid a note under the door while I was showering. It's not much, just one of the receipts tucked into the covers of books that marks when they get checked out. Instead of names and dates, the message is simple. Saturday, midnight, gymnasium under the library. Books are on the 3rd floor, last shelf. I forgot that professors, even ones at the academy, have first names. They all seem so professional, and I can't imagine Professor Frey as being anything other than a dick with a title. Unfortunately, the more time I spend around him, the more my initial impression feels like a drop in the bucket. Did you find a secret boyfriend I don't know about? She eyes me, grinning from ear to ear as if she's caught me somehow with a dirty secret. Oh my God, you totally do. I bet it's that guy from our magical history class. Ryan. There is no Ryan in magical history. I'm assuming she's talking about the guy in the front row who answered one of the questions after mine and winked at me when he was done telling Frey what he knew. That was our only interaction, and neither of us bothered to learn the guy's actual name. If she thinks he's my secret lover, it's probably better than trying to explain that I'm actually meeting our professor in the dead of night. Are you guys going to fuck in the library? She asks. That's so hot and so dirty. Against the books on the 3rd floor? I hear no one hangs out there, so it should be pretty secluded no matter what time you're there. Can just imagine it now. She proceeds to act out a very humiliating display, moaning and all, before I finally throw a pillow at her and ask her to shut up. Paige doesn't seem to care that she's mortified me to high heaven. Instead, she cackles. You know, my tarot cards were telling me about your new love interest. She tells me. Remember when I told you to draw a card yesterday? Vaguely. Between homework assignments, she'd asked me to pull a card and tell her whatever I interpreted from it. I was indifferent to tarot, especially given my asshole sister's tendency to use them as weapons against me at any time of day. The moon. I'd pulled the moon from the center of the deck, like the card was calling to me as loudly as a neon sign. Seems a little on the nose now that I'm thinking about it. Supposedly we're reading into my love life, and the object of it is my werewolf professor revealed by a moon card. What the actual hell? So my secret lover is the moon? Or drawn to it? Front row guy is a werewolf. Maybe that's why the deck chose that card. I don't know anything about wolves, or if they'd rather not be grouped into a series of cliches, but I trust Paige's analysis. From what I understand, divination witches know their decks as if they're sentient beings with personalities of their own. I don't think it's that deep, though. The guy from class is just a guy, and his name doesn't start with an R from what I can guess, but I doubt Paige is in the mood to argue about the semantics of who is named who was sitting where, and if the gossip I've acquired is right or not. I'll let her come up with her own ideas as to why I'm vanishing on Saturday to meet someone. It's better than her figuring out our werewolf professor's first name also starts with an R. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The best way to bring out a werewolf's gifts is to put one in a difficult situation. Something uncomfortable and unpleasant. Usually the initial transformation unlocks some of those abilities, but at the end of the day, the rest comes with a heavy learning curve. I've read a few books on the pedagogy of teaching witches magic. It was something Thorne advised us to do, as if the staff would all somehow be doing cross-species courses on things far outside of our comfort zones. I retained some of it. Teaching Grace will be remedial stuff at best, given that she doesn't know the first thing about her own gifts. The second part of our bargain is what I'm focused on. That's where the money shot is. Find the right book, reject her as my mate, disregard the prophecy, and get on with our lives with both of us alive to tell the tale. Sounds simple enough theoretically, but actually putting it into practice is a different ballpark. She shows up early in a pair of leggings, which generally seem easier to move around within her long skirts or sundresses, and an oversized sweater that bunches around her hands. She seems a bit tired, even stifling a yawn as she enters the gym. It used to be a staff gym. Used to is an operative word only because no one goes down here anymore. There are a few punching bags, rusted weights, and even a mat in the center for wrestling in past years. I can't remember the last time anyone mentioned this place, let alone the last time I was in this room. It's secluded enough that we can get to work. So what are we doing? She asks. Do you even know if you can bring out my powers? That will come later, I reply. For now, we're going to do some sparring. She looks at me like I've lost my mind. Sparring? Do I look like I know anything about sparring. Defensive tactics aren't just about your powers. They're also about your body. Your shortcomings are all happening because you're not connected to your innermost self. She rolls her eyes. Every witch calls that her higher self. I'm pretty sure I don't have one. You do, I say resolutely. You just have to connect with her. I move to stand behind a punching bag, bracing my hands against it as she swings lamely at it. It almost seems like she isn't trying, probably because she thinks the exercise is a waste of her time. I see it all the time in class where a student doesn't want to put effort into something he or she thinks they're too good for. You can hit harder than that, I deadpan. You could also respect my time. What does punching have to do with anything? She counters hotly. Last I checked, I'm doing you a favor by being your unpaid TA. A bargain implies I get something out of this, and hitting a bag of sand isn't going to do shit for me. You have to be able to fight with your body as well as with a weapon, I reply. What are you supposed to do if you lose your ability to conjure? No, it happens to plenty of witches. Performance anxiety is a very real thing. I don't have performance anxiety, she bites out. Prove it, I challenge her. Her pride won't let her acknowledge my point, so she throws another punch as her answer. This time her knuckles sink into the bag a bit harder, earning a look of approval from me before I realize what I'm doing with my face and restrain myself. You could have started out hitting like that, I tell her. Give it a good swing. Keep it up like you actually mean it. She glares at me, massaging her right hand gingerly, since she's not wearing gloves, though I left some out for her and offered them a few times now. She's definitely going to have bruises from this tomorrow. I release the bag and extend the gloves, waving them around. Put these on before you fuck up your hands. I don't need to walk you to the infirmary again. Gee, thanks, she says. Thankfully, she doesn't fight me and puts the damn gloves on, protecting herself a little better from the pressure of the exercise. When she throws the next punch, I get the impression it's still strenuous due to the newness of it all, but this time she seems to take the blow to her hand more easily. Tell me about your sisters, I say. She seems thrown off by the request, but when she rocks forward on her heels, she manages to recover, pulling back for another punch. What about them? You said you're the only one without magic. What can they do? What can't they do? She mutters. I hear all the time about how perfect they are, how fucking great they do in their magic lessons with my mother. She hits the bag a bit harder, her jabs gaining momentum as she propels them forward. How do you stand it? Always being second class. I know the wording is going to aggravate her, which is sort of the idea. Get her angry, draw out the protection of her higher self. I wanted to motivate her, even if the means are a bit unorthodox. I work at the flower shop, and I pretend it doesn't get to me. She curls her fists up and punches the bag so hard that it nearly knocks me over. The strength behind that blow sure as hell didn't come from her alone. But maybe that's because there's this whole other side of her that I have yet to see. There was power in that hit, and maybe her family is the chink in the armor that unleashes it. I eye her, sizing her up. Do you think you haven't unlocked your powers? Because you don't want to. She shakes her head. Of course I want to. Why else would I be here? Maybe you're in denial. I know what you're doing, she says. What is it I'm doing? Enlighten me. Being an ass on purpose. Clearly it isn't working to accomplish anything. Should I be more cruel? Is that what gets you to respond? She says nothing. She also doesn't bother to look at me and see my reaction. When she hits the bag again, it's even harder this time. The material splits at the impact, and I stumble back in surprise. I round the front of the bag, staring at it, then at her. That is how you throw a punch. I spend the next 5 minutes patching it up with tape before I lead her over to the mats. She watches me in disbelief the whole time, still unable to grasp that she was responsible for that punch. Even given her bratty sisters, I get the impression she's never hit anyone or anything before now. Maybe her victory high will be what brings her to the next step, the next level of our defensive tactics training. What are we doing here? She asks as her feet meet the training mat. Are we going to fight or something? Not exactly. I want you to train as if we're combat equals, because my hope is that your higher self, the part of you connected with that dormant magic, is going to jump in and intervene when your human self can't keep up. Are you going easy on me? She replies nervously. I've never done this. I shake my head. I can take it easy on you at first, but we can't keep pulling our punches or else you won't learn a thing from me. You're going to have to hit me. She stares at me, her mouth flying open. Does that mean I'm going to hit you? I ask. When she nods, I continue. Probably. Great, she mutters. Professor, I don't think this is a good idea. You need to learn how to fight, I argue. The only way to do that is to fight something other than a punching bag. I don't want to hurt you, she says, crossing her arms. I'm not gonna do this. I shrug. Then I won't waste my time on you. I'm not sure if I'm bluffing, or if I truly intend to walk out of the room if she doesn't change her mind about this. The only way she's going to learn is if she trusts my lessons. The fact of the matter is she has to want it. Need her help, but admittedly trying to hold her hand through this isn't doing wonders for my very limited patience. I turn, about to take a step off the mat when she finally gives in. Fine, she snaps. Then she lunges at me without a second thought. My hand shoots out and nails her in the stomach, knocking her off balance. Quickly and easily, I brace her, or maybe the wolf does, catching her before she hits the floor. After stabilizing her, I let go. Nice try, I say. Again. She steps and aims a fist, but I catch it and elbow her in the stomach. I'm not hitting her hard. I'm not a psychotic asshole, but I am trying to simulate the right conditions. Something to make her respond. She loses her breath and stumbles, taking another blow to the side. Weakly, she punches me in the nose, actually managing to land it. It hurts, flooding my vision with water and bright white light. My foot comes out, sweeping under her ankles and brings her down on the mat. I huff out a breath and pain radiates throughout my damn nose. Reluctantly, I hold out a hand to help her up. You have to let it out. Let what out? You know what I'm talking about. The higher self you supposedly don't have. Let it out, let yourself disconnect from your overthinking. It's what's keeping you from the results you want. She takes my hand and I help her up. Within seconds she's down. Again, like the fight is only getting a limited effort from her. She doesn't seem invested in the lesson, which is why every strategy keeps failing. Are you even trying? I ask. Yes, she exclaims, frustrated. You keep beating the hell out of me. That's not the intention, I reply. I'm not even treating you the way I'd treat another soldier from my unit or even a guy in the pack. I haven't really started hitting you yet. You'd hit a girl? She asks, out of breath. My thoughts and expressions are unreadable, even to me. Remember that in the ring and in a fight there are no genders. This is life or death. Act like it. When she gets back up, this time almost feral, I fight a smile. Now the real fight begins. When I was deployed overseas, we would sometimes watch MMA fights like this, where one person was at such a disadvantage there was no turning back until something else came out of them. Something alive. There it is, I say. And then I aim a punch at her. Or at least try to. She catches my fist, wrenches it backward, and delivers a blow to the rib so quickly I can't breathe. She kicks me in the knee, the stomach, and finally punches me right in the nose again and renders me blind. I try to fight back, but the wolf practically tells me to fuck right off. That's right. A wolf can't seriously harm his mate, no matter how much he'd like to. What happened before was child's play, but as intense as he'll let me get. I can't touch her, and she's humiliating me. I'm gushing blood now, but somehow upright. I hit her stomach and she keels over, granting me a single second to wipe the blood from my nose and try to get myself clear-sighted again. She hits the mat, her knees breaking her fall. When she looks up at me, it's like I'm seeing her for the first time. She's so beautiful, so youthful. There's something about watching her as the energy around her crackles that makes the wolf howl with need. Something beyond me, greater than me, latches onto her, wanting her. When I falter, unable to deliver the hit needed to knock her down for good, she takes advantage and pins me quickly and effectively. Even though she's smaller than me, I'm impressed by her strength. Admittedly, other parts of me are starting to enjoy her being on top of me, and it's dangerous, the game we're playing. I wipe my nose again and wince. That was one hell of a hit. I'm sorry. I grab her by the hips and flip us over before she can finish her apology. Her body is crushed against the floor under my weight, but I'm easy on her. Lower my face close to hers and say quietly, do not hesitate. If you have your enemy down, keep them there. You hesitated, she reminds me. Damn her for being right. I shouldn't have, I say. Taught us both a lesson. Let's go again. By the end of it, we're both covered in sweat and my blood. She isn't. Scratched up, and beyond the bruises from her punches, which were self-inflicted, she's in one piece. The wolf is pleased with that, and he seems adamant about teaching and somehow coddling her at once. I'm not sure why he's so hesitant, and no matter how much I try to reason with the primal part of my brain, it refuses to listen. By the end of it, I want to kiss her, claim her, do something to make a move that'll satisfy the beast and my need to devour her, especially after the way she showed she could hold her own. There was something about it that aroused me. In every sense and every way she could devastate my attention. This was a horrible idea. The longer the lesson goes, the deeper the hole I dig myself. Soon it'll be impossible to hide the way I feel about her or to disguise our mating bond to anyone else. If other wolves are starting to see it, surely it's a matter of time before she does too. Thank you, Professor, she says at the end of it all. We're both too tired to continue, and I can smell her sweat and whatever else is radiating off of her, turning me into a tunnel-visioned animal. Jesus fuck, she's got me backed into a corner. Let me know what you find in the library, is all I can say. I'll see you in class. I have to leave before I do anything stupid. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. We're rapidly approaching the full moon, and I haven't seen much of Professor Frey since we started our lessons last week. The last time we met, we just read books about werewolf bonds. Whenever I tried to speak to him, he shut me down with brusque yes or no answers until I gave up on trying to engage. What the hell is his problem? He comes to me asking for help, offers to give me magic lessons, and then suddenly can't talk to me? Paige and I have been in other classes together, and the other lessons at Pacific Academy have been keeping us busy enough. Occult study, divination, even potions, there's not a single dull moment, and I've been enjoying my time a lot more than I thought I would. Now that I've gotten past the looming fear of not being good enough, I've been able to enjoy my time with magical study. My sister's voice has become a quiet background noise. Unfortunately, Professor Frey is in everything I do. He's the center of gossip that runs like a current through the academy. Seems like he captures every whisper, like somehow every girl is drawn in wanting to speculate about him. The rumors run under the underbelly of the school, shared in fleeting bursts. I heard he served in the military. He is the first alpha in a century to not be a pure-blooded wolf. I heard he is still looking for a mate. Think he'll take applications? I don't know much about wolves and their mates, to be honest, so whenever I hear a hopeful girl wondering about whether or not he'll choose her, I assume it's as simple as a choice. I've been devouring every book in the library, but it doesn't seem like there's a clear reason for why the mating bond exists or what prompts it to spark. I doubt it's as simple as wearing a short skirt to magical history, but I'm no better than the rest of them. I let myself look a little too long at him too. The library is different during daylight hours. The sunlight rolls through the massive windows, showcasing the dust particles floating in the air. When a new book opens or slams shut, more of it rains down around us. The stacks seem to be limitless, and the one I've been carrying between the table that Paige and I are sharing seems to get taller by the moment. Sandwiched between my school books are for Professor Frey's assignment on werewolves and their bonds. All of it is speculation, as most of them aren't written by anyone afflicted with lycanthropy. It makes me wonder how anyone could figure themselves out, especially with such limited information. Even with the presence of shifters in the world of magic, the condition of the werewolf is stigmatized. Personally, I've never been of the mind that I could judge anyone, especially given the fact that I don't personally seem to have much magic at all. Someone as handsome as Frey, who doesn't seem all that beastly, probably isn't worthy of half the scorn werewolves get. I assume that's the point of this institution, to break down barriers and limit stigmas. What the founders probably didn't realize is that, if there's anything I know about people, it's that they'll always find ways to create barriers to make differences more profound and alienating. Paige leans over from her side of the table, where she seems to be in the middle of writing a research paper for one of the few classes we don't share, and stares at the pages of the book I'm reading, her curiosity evident. What's that for? Oh, this. Just a book about werewolves. For our professor, who seems to hate my guts. I found it on the shelf. It's for, extra credit. In our magical history class. I didn't know there was extra credit, says Paige. You want to pass along the instructions? I must have missed the part where he went over the bonus assignments. I know he's the toughest prof they have on campus. It was something I asked for separately. I lie, interjecting before she can get too far down the rabbit hole. Sometimes Paige gets a little lost in her mind, rambling until she spins herself in circles. I failed the first quiz. Pretty bad. He offered me a second chance to make up some of the points. Since you're doing so well, I know you don't need to bother with it. Paige is an overachiever. Self-proclaimed, of course, because I wouldn't label her one way or the other. She gives me the impression that she'd rather set the curve than settle for just an A. I've always preferred to just get by however I can. Being the least skilled of my sisters makes it easy to blend into the background. It also means I never set my expectations too high. I didn't know you failed, she says, her brows knitting together. Maybe we should study together next time just to make sure we both pass. I didn't know you were struggling. I didn't either, I reply. Thankfully, one of the vampires, a girl named Eleanor, walks by the table, dropping a folded piece of parchment on top of one of Paige's books. Immediately, her cheeks are ablaze with a blush. I raise a brow at her, but all she does is smile sheepishly and unfold it. There's a full moon party in the clearing tonight, she says. It's apparently a big deal. Don't the wolves run tonight? She rolls her eyes. The packs leave big groups of people alone. Everyone knows the curfew is just a formality. No one has been mauled in the entire time the school's been open. Somehow this doesn't comfort me much. I'm certain I could be the first of all kinds of things when it comes to this school, but I'd prefer if being mauled to death in the name of drinking in the woods wasn't one of them. I heard this party is a tradition. The term only has 2 full moons total, so this first one is where the party starts and the solstice is when it ends. We're just lucky to have been invited, not everyone is. I assume Paige is the reason for the invitation. It's not like my antisocial ass is winning people over. Outside of Professor Frey and my roommate, I don't make a habit of socializing. It also doesn't help that other members of the student body nearly murdered me, but I'm trying not to take that part personally. I mean, could happen to anyone, right? We have to look hot, she says. The way she draws out the word sounds more like hot. She's so enthusiastic about it that all I can do is nod my head. Although I'm admittedly nervous about what that means for the clothes I've packed. I doubt anything I have is fit for a party, mostly because I've only been to one in my life and left early. But I digress. You're in Mama's capable hands, she assures me. Don't call yourself Mama, I reply with a wince. She rolls her eyes. Honestly, I hate that she's clairvoyant because having the kind of roommate who picks up on your emotions makes it hard to have any sort of privacy. I know she could probably sense there was some evasion happening on my part when it came to the extra credit part of the conversation, so I'm just relieved that she let it go. Paige glances back down at her books on the table, sighing theatrically. It's gonna be so hard to study now. How am I supposed to concentrate knowing a cute girl just invited us to a party? We should have started getting ready yesterday. You weren't invited yesterday, I say at a loss. She shrugs. I could have done some divination about needing to prepare. Ugh. You're going to look great. You always do. I don't add that comparing oneself to a vampire isn't constructive because no one can look as perfect as they do. It's part of the lure people in to suck their blood charm, so whenever one is born or turned, they're like poisonous flowers. Stunning to look at but lethal to the touch. Thankfully, those of us who aren't normies don't have to worry about becoming a meal, but I was always warned to stay far away from a hungry vamp anyway. As my roommate is currently demonstrating, it's easier said than done. I mean, they look like sex on a stick, and in this school where the dating options are slim, anyone in close proximity might seem like a fair option, no matter how sharp their teeth. She seems a little relieved at my reassurance. You're pretty gorgeous too. We're going to rock this bitch. She slams her books shut so loudly a plume of dust bursts from them. Determined, Paige is up from her seat, extending her hand to me as if reminding me that I have no other choice than to follow. I guess my studying will have to wait. I've never been particularly good at doing my makeup, but Paige must have some kind of spell work that she uses on all of her products because my smoky eye looks airbrushed on, and whenever I catch a glimpse of myself I feel like a different person. I ended up wearing my cut-off shorts, normally reserved exclusively for wearing around the dorm because of how tiny they are, and a crop tank top that dips low enough in the front to remind everyone that I have boobs. Given that I'm not very, well endowed, the reminder is probably needed. Paige borrowed one of my sundresses, but on her full figure, it's a bit shorter, and with the way she's carrying herself, she looks so gorgeous that there's no way I can wear it after her. She looks amazing, which isn't a surprise, and as she wanders around, pulling tarot cards from her deck to ask questions about the night, I find myself a little nervous. My first college party. Everyone else in attendance will probably have been to so many parties by this point in adulthood. I'm the odd man out here, but hopefully I can keep a low enough profile to sneak a couple beers and get through the night. Emphasis on the hopefully. Just breathe, says Paige as we're sneaking down the darkened corridor. Not like we're in high school. I doubt there are any wardens or babysitters waiting to send us back to our dorms or assigned detentions. There's really no point in talking so quietly, but we do it anyway. I am breathing, I quip. Less like you're about to die then, she says, elbowing me. This is your chance to have a blast. This is the one place in the world where all of us can fit in. So look alive, roomie. This is the youngest we're ever going to be. Again. Geez, way to sell it. We head down the hill and into the forest. I don't hear any howling or growls, which means we're probably safe for now. As we head into the clearing where a massive bonfire is lit, we're greeted with incomprehensible cheers and shouts. Paige guides me to the ice chest, grabbing me a mixer with a grin. I'm glad someone remembered to sneak in the booze. As she rips off the cap and clinks our drinks together, I can't fight the sneaking feeling that something isn't quite right. Maybe it's the fact that a bunch of drunk people decided a large open flame was the way to go with regards to ambience, or maybe it's the fact I know there's a pack of wolves without control of their faculties out running around on the grounds. Whatever it is, my anxiety is sitting low in my belly, refusing to leave me alone. I end up parking myself closer to the edge of the clearing where the crowd is less overwhelming. As I sit down on a log nursing my drink, I find myself missing the comfort of bed, which is decidedly not this place where there's too much sound and my only friend is swarmed by her crush and a bunch of other vamps. You okay? The voice asking is deep and unmistakably male. When I turn to see a guy from down the hall, a warlock I can't remember the name of, all I can do is offer a stiff smile. I nod, but it's probably the least convincing move I've ever made in my life. I'm Tegan, he says, offering his hand. I shake uncertainly, trying to will away any residual sweat on my palm. Grace. You're friends with Paige then? He asks. I'm from California too, so everyone knows her coven. She's pretty cool. She's my roommate, I say. And yeah, I'd say she's pretty cool. She's one of the nicest people I've met so far here. Tegan nods. That Professor Frey is such a ballbuster, isn't he? I know. We're in class together for his course and the dude is a fucking asshole. Didn't he go after you on the first day? I shrug. I don't remember. Unsurprisingly, reliving that memory isn't high on my list of priorities. Can't tell if he's going to respond with sympathy or judgment, and frankly, I'm not sure I'd like to hear either. It sucks enough that anyone else remembers it happened, let alone talk about it. He gets a little closer to me. Too close, frankly, and there's only a few inches between us. I refuse to turn my head to look at him out of fear he'll think that's some kind of invitation to tongue me. He's not very good looking, and he has the air of thinking he's Aphrodite's gift to the world, so I'd rather not engage. Unfortunately, he can't take a hint. He leans in, lowering his voice a little. You're not one of those chicks who wants to suck his dick, right? What? He raises his hands. All I'm saying is, it's a little odd that you're ready to defend the guy, especially since he wasn't all that friendly to you. Do you like him or something? It's like half the school does. I don't, but even if I did, it wouldn't be your fucking business, I snap, pushing away from him. Whoa, 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 he says. I wasn't trying to make you mad or anything. Was just asking you a simple question. I thought maybe you wouldn't be like the other girls, but I guess you are. Let me guess, Todd or whatever the fuck your name is, the other girls you hate so much don't want to fuck you either, and it's wounded your ego so deeply that you've deluded yourself into thinking it can't possibly be because of you. I get to my feet, throwing my partially drunk bottle into the grass. Add me to your list of cliches. At least it means that I won't have to sleep with you. I don't care that Paige is still hanging out. At this point I'd rather walk through the woods alone than spend another second with an asshole trying to get into my pants. She's so engrossed in her conversation with the beautiful vampire that she doesn't even notice Tegan storming off to tell his buddies what a bitch I am. I probably only have a few moments to get out of here before he's making a scene. Without waiting around any longer, I disappear into the woods. Thankfully he doesn't follow. Good. I won't have to introduce him to the mace on my keychain. I never thought it would legitimately come in handy, but now I'm holding it like a lifeline. Unfortunately for me, it's so dark outside that making sense of the forest, even if we're only a few yards into it, feels impossible. The trees are so towering and thick that they almost completely obscure the sky and the stars. Navigating this is going to be a nightmare, and it certainly doesn't help that I have the alcohol tolerance of a toddler. I'm not sure why I feel so ridiculous. There's something about teetering through the woods like I've forgotten how to walk that makes me feel vulnerable, and once the hatch opens, the more my mind floods. At the end of the day, we're a couple weeks in, and I feel like I'm not closer to harnessing my magic than I was when I started. Feels like I'm playing at belonging here, and maybe I am, but I guess I hoped after what Professor Frey said I could feel like I was proving something to myself. Unfortunately, at this current time I'm proving nothing except what my sisters have yapped on about over the years. Before I can get too far into the spiral, a branch breaks and 4 pairs of eyes gleam in the darkness as wolves emerge from the cover of the trees. Before I have any time to run, I'm surrounded by them. The eyes follow me, and when lips curl back to reveal sharp teeth, snouts about the size of my head, I'm certain I'm about to become the first person to get mauled on Pacific Academy's campus, and they'll tell ghost stories about me haunting the woods for years to come. Before the first dog can jump and attack me, another wolf much bigger than the rest leaps into the center of the pack and lands in front of me. Its coat is black as night, streaked with silver. Against the floor, its paws dig their claws into the mud, and immediately the other wolves retreat, tails tucked, revealing their submission. Cool. I'm about to become the snack of an even bigger wolf. I just hope my death is quick. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Rome. Several years ago. What kind of a name is Romulus? The enlisting officer laughed in my face the day I joined the military. I wish I could say I was joking, but the second I walked up to the desk, all skin and bones, too tall, too awkward to be picked first for any sport, he took one look at me and told me to come back when I was tough enough to take a bullet. I rolled up my sleeve, showed him the cigarette burn scars my father gave me as a souvenir, and asked if he wanted to test my tolerance. He laughed again when he saw my name. I was born Romulus Frey. I'd like to say my parents knew about our wolf gene when they picked it, but they didn't. Just became another touch of irony later, when I realized the implications of being part animal. But we'll get to that. I didn't know what I was getting into. All I knew was that the trust fund wouldn't kick in for another 7 years, when I turned 25 or married some socialite my parents approved, and if I stayed around my old man any longer, he might kill me before I saw a dime. Or worse, I'd do him in. The military was the easiest option. I'd like to say there was a noble reason for signing up. The truth is, I wasn't doing it to save lives, and I wasn't doing it because I'd always dreamed of fighting overseas for a politician's war. I needed to escape, and a stable source of income and tax benefits was the easiest call in the world to make. I signed up the day I turned 18. I don't remember if I ever went home to get my shit. Next thing I knew, they'd shaved my hair all the way down to the scalp, buzzed so short I didn't recognize myself, and got me my own cot in the barracks. I'm sure I could tell any number of stories about my time there, how I made 0 friends but got oddly comfortable shitting in front of other men. How we pretended not to hear when one of them snuck a girl in. Those aren't the stories worth telling. The fact of the matter is, they aren't the ones anyone wants to hear. At the end of the day, my experiences in the barracks aren't different from the next guy's, and honestly, I was a stupid kid. Reliving the decision to enlist over and over again doesn't make me feel all that thrilled. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't. I'd take the ass-kicking from Dad instead. He died a year after I enlisted anyway, but I couldn't have known that would happen. All I knew was a quick and dirty exit plan. Picture this. Stupidly young kid doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He decides to sell his soul to Uncle Sam, give up all of his freedom for some Noble 'cause he doesn't know anything about, and then it all goes to shit. We shipped out to the Middle East after our unit passed every boot camp test. With flying colors. It was summer in the desert of Afghanistan, and the windstorms would kick up enough dust to make us choke on our breath when we'd do morning rounds. The sun was enough to kick my ass without my gear or my gun, and the combination of all of it put half the unit into heat strokes. Within the first week, there were a lot of kids nearby. They play soccer with us soldiers, and even if we didn't speak a lick of each other's languages, we found a way to have a good time. I could almost forget I was fighting a war. Almost. Then the first kid walked into our camp with a bomb strapped to his chest. 3 guys died trying to save him before it went off. After that, everything was dark. The soccer balls stopped being kicked to our side of the road. The streets got quiet. The first time I killed someone was indirect. I'd chosen to pull back, abandoning the kid with the bomb. It might not have mattered that I gave up. But I'll never know. We can only see the consequences of the actions we take, not the ones we didn't. They say hindsight is 20/20, but I think those fuckers have never been on a battlefield. The second time was a mercy kill, and it cost me my soul. They ambushed us in the dead of night. My convoy was on one of the Hummers doing a patrol. We went over an IED and it blew us sky high. The driver tried to swerve, which is the only reason anyone made it out with some of their guts intact. The guy across from me, Rick, busted into so many pieces that we couldn't find shit to bury for his wife. In the wreckage of the car, I crawled over to my buddy Chris. He was the only guy I'd consider anything close to a friend, and the enemy was swarming us. His legs were pinned under a huge piece of the truck that wasn't giving way, and the gunfire was getting closer. There was only so much the cover of night could do for us. If we didn't move, they'd pump us full of lead, or worse, take us away for information. Chris knew it too. That's why he desperately gripped my arm, pleading with me to get the hell out of there. My leg was busted open, but I refused to look at the damage because I knew it would kill whatever adrenaline was letting me walk. Kill me. He wheezed out. Do it quick. I go back to that moment all the damn time. I think about the fact he probably had enough arterial damage that if they tried to take him hostage, he'd spurt like a geyser and bleed out in seconds. I think about the fact that none of us had ever thought we'd be in this situation, and so no one had ever made their wishes known. Back in the barracks, we always talked about the things we would do when we got home, not our plans for what would happen if we didn't. The way guys go. AWOL starts with the death conversation. Whatever you do suggesting that we could all be fucking dead by the next morning is the worst move you can make. That's when people go crazy. That's when they start killing, or worse, deserting and getting other people in their platoons good and dead. I remember how Chris looked at that time. He had dirt all over his face. We all tended to catch it, just as a natural consequence of summer sweat and the nasty clouds of it hanging around. This was different. It was like he was half buried, his face obscured with blood, motor oil, and makeshift graveyard dirt. I could barely tell who he was. Probably wouldn't have put 2 and 2 together if it hadn't been for his voice. I'd know it anywhere because he was the class clown of boot camp. Wherever Chris went, laughter followed. His voice sounded so different in the moments just before his death. When I later gave the incident report, I had to be pulled back from a pretty awful spiral about it. His voice sounded so empty and hollow. Fuck, I could feel how young we were in the desperate way he begged for me to put him out of his misery. It's a miracle I could hear him anyway, with the enemy gunfire, the sparks igniting from the exploded gas tank, the squelching of organs and corpses as the rubble sifted. The actual event happened in 5 minutes. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. Everything that's changed my life was influenced by such a small window of time. Everything was stolen from me before I could take an inventory of my fucking wounds. When I recollect these events, I think about if he would have died anyway had I not grabbed the pistol strapped to my belt and blew his face off with it. I didn't stick around to see his corpse. No, I bolted. I took off running as far and fast as I could until I collapsed near our base. My memories get hazy. After shooting Chris, I think reinforcements arrived and forced the fuckers to retreat. Somehow, they dragged me to the infirmary with a leg no better than shattered glass. The leg had bone and bits of metal sticking through the skin. Somehow my adrenaline kept me from feeling it. The dirt and blood and grease and everything else kept me from seeing the full impact until I passed out from I had a reconstructive surgery that saved me from amputation, but it wasn't looking good for me. I was so injured they honorably discharged me. Badges and all. The PT regimen if I wanted to ever walk again was intense, and I was so depressed that I couldn't care less about walking. All of my friends were in the ground, but I was there with them. In the span of a month, everything changed. Here's how becoming a werewolf works. You kill someone directly, and the next moon you turn into a monster. There's no room for nuance. I've heard of wolves who killed someone in self-defense or ones who fell asleep at the wheel. Passive kills are one thing, the only nuance. Most people never have to consider the reality of taking a life. That's how bloodlines become dormant, waiting to be awoken. For the line of the Frey wolves, it was such a distant legend, so far removed from anyone living that no one believed in werewolves or even thought it was possible to undergo the change. All I knew was that I'd been shipped back home barely in one piece. The transformation never gets easier, but the first one is the worst. As agony, how it happens. Your skin rips apart, muscles and tendons reshaping to allow the body to morph. New teeth push through your gums, filling your mouth with the taste of your own blood. When the nails push out of your fingers, you feel it for a few fleeting seconds before hands and feet become paws. Sometimes throughout the moon you're in and out of consciousness, but it's mostly the wolf that does the thinking. It's what makes a werewolf so dangerous, and especially new ones. The first time I turned, I was completely alone in my childhood home. Thankfully, the place was empty. I shudder to think what might have happened to any unsuspecting people on the property had my mother not taken off and dismissed the staff. It was late. The change doesn't happen at the first signs of moonlight. When the moon is at its highest, we're all susceptible to turning. Some people fight it, but ultimately it can't be stopped. I didn't know, of course. I'd thrown myself out of bed when the pain started. I was in so much agony that I was certain that my wounds had become horribly infected and the inflammation was spreading to all of my major organs. The rational thoughts didn't last for very long, however. I was midway into calling the cops when I crushed the landline under one of my paws. Now a change takes me 2 minutes. I let the wolf in and he handles the rest. Still super painful, but it doesn't get dragged out the same way it did then, when all I wanted was to fight it off. I woke up disoriented and very naked. I learned that the wolf had somehow reconstructed my fucked up leg enough to let me walk. It was never quite the same, and the scars are proof of what really happened to me. He couldn't fix everything, and what some would consider a blessing I could only see as a curse. So what if I was saved? I didn't want to be. My survival was contingent on where I sat in the Hummer, and I was serving penance for killing a man who begged me to let him die. It was a cruel, cruel irony. My memories of the night when the werewolf and I traded consciousness were only of snippets, but it was enough to make me wonder, and wonder became research, and then I was brought into the world of the supernatural, given answers I didn't want. Nothing remained of me. The man I was died with the rest of my unit. Present day. There's a rule among the wolves here. Or maybe it's better described as a pleasantry. You never ask who a wolf killed to become what he or she is. You never talk about the change or any of the uncomfortable firsts that come with the condition. It's much easier that way. No one gets hurt and no one pours out their heart and soul. Admittedly, I'm sure there are horror stories some of these kids have that would make my blood curdle. There are stories others might share that may mean they disappear entirely, because some wolves do deserve the change. I like the speculation that follows me. Most of them have no idea who I really am or what my background looks like, and so any attempts made to decipher it are hopeless and never do them any good. Some people think I killed my dad for the money. Some think it was a bar fight. No one knows, but the rumors make me dangerous, and it means they usually leave me the fuck alone. The kids will transform together on this full moon. They always do, in a makeshift pack, even if some of them belong to different ones. I never bother to spend any time with them. I don't bond, and I already have a pack I can barely stand to be around. Instead, I transform alone and roam alone until the sun rises. I've been avoiding Grace all week, but as the night gets closer, the wolf reminds me of who she is, nagging at me for distancing myself from her. Can't deny that the prophecy is making me edgy. I'm no closer to finding answers than I was at the start of term. The longer she's around, the harder it is to control the wolf's impulses. Sometimes they're loud and almost have me bursting at the seams. Grace. Gods, what I would do for one night with her. When she really gets on my nerves just by being around and smelling the way she does, like vanilla. And temptation, I imagine what it would be like to indulge the forbidden fruit. I wonder what she tastes like, how it would feel to kiss her and have my wicked way with her just once. But, as I'm preparing myself for tonight, I have to remind the wolf to keep it in his pants. It's the weekend and we'll finally be getting a break from her. Well, I will. I can already imagine his howls of lamentation, and we haven't even turned yet. It's going to be a long moon. Chapter 11. Chapter 11. A number of realizations wash over me when the sunlight blinds me in the morning. Two of them jump out at me first most. The first is that I'm sleeping outside of Professor Frey's cottage in the grass, and a ladybug is crawling around my forearm and making laps around my elbow. The second is that Professor Frey is not only snuggling me, but he is also very, very naked. I'm not sure how I got here, but I better figure it out fast because my grumpy professor probably won't be happy about this once he wakes up. I'd like to have some kind of answer for the fact our bodies are intertwined, and his very large and very hard morning wood is pushing against my spine where our bodies are curled around one another. I didn't know that dicks could be this big, and I also didn't know they could be this up close and personal with my ass. Guess I'm learning a hell of a lot today. That much is clear. I try to wiggle out from under his arm, but it's very heavy and very firm around me. Now that I'm processing the full experience here, I'm starting to realize that he's almost folded over me to protect me, like he's trying to keep something away. Oh right. I left the party in the clearing, got lost in the woods, and almost got eaten by a pack of werewolves until one very large one came out of nowhere and saved me. It also protected me all through the night, even when I was so drunk I was passed out and dead to the world. Fuck. My professor saved my life again. That definitely wasn't on my bingo card of expectations for this weekend. Gods, how did this even happen? I mean, in theory he should have torn me apart too. There was no reason for him to exercise self-control, and even if he's been a werewolf for longer, he should have attacked me. So why didn't he? Suddenly, it's so obvious how everything stacks up and falls into place. His sudden hostility at the start of the year, research about werewolves and their bonds, not wanting me to be kicked out of the academy, not because of his own desires but because he has to look out for me. I'm his mate. I'm Professor Frey's mate. And that's why he didn't just save me from the other wolves, but he also protected me for the entire night. Everything is falling into focus now, and it's almost like as I'm acknowledging the bond, it strikes a chord inside of my chest and tightens within his. He starts to groan, and I push away from him, scrambling across the grass on my back as he wakes up. When he does, he immediately widens his eyes, covering himself with his hands. I turn around, covering my eyes. Not that it matters, because I've already seen him naked. I now know the way his dick looks at full mast, and I know what happens where his hips divot into a V shape. I now have seen a lot of his scars and every line of muscle. He's hot as all hell. And he's looking at me right now, boring holes into the back of my head. How long have you been here? He demands. All night, I answer, figuring it's best not to lie. I suspect the wolf wouldn't let me leave. He sighs in exasperation. I can hear him shuffling around, and presumably he finds where he stashed his clothes in the yard, because his zipper makes a sharp noise as his jeans come around his hips. Now that he's decent, I can face him again, and boy is he giving me hell with those eyes. Maybe, he says, if you weren't trying to get yourself killed again, I wouldn't have needed to protect you. Did you consider that, Grace? At first, I can't believe what he's saying. He's seriously blaming me for the fact this school has bloodthirsty beasts running around? I mean, it's not like I wanted to be strolling around in the woods, but student safety is better off safeguarded, and it sure as hell wasn't being safeguarded last night. Not that it's your business, but I was at a party I didn't want to be at and was trying to go home. You know, be responsible. It's not like I have a choice when it comes to finding myself in these situations. He's got me so fired up now that the words are coming out of my mouth like machine gun fire. I can't stop myself from tearing into him, as though every ounce of frustration I've been holding onto is coming out on a wave of emotion. So I keep going. Any sane person would be, I don't know, trying to avoid danger. Besides, you're not exactly the person I wanted to rescue me, since you make me feel like being alive is some awful inconvenience to you. Don't worry, Professor. I'll try to die next time. I throw my hands up, making a noise. That's half a scream, half a groan of anger. I even hold up my middle finger, just to make it known how much he's pushed my buttons. He crosses his arms over his chest. Goddamn, he's still not wearing a shirt. And it's very distracting when I'm trying to hate him with every fiber of my being. I have to remind myself not to look at his abs or his happy trail or the dusting of hair on his broad pecs. Focus, Grace, focus. You could have started with a thank you, he says. I laugh, but it's a hysterical cackle more than anything else. What the fuck? Did you just say to me? I said you should say thank you to the person who saves your life, he snaps. His face is growing red now, and the intensity in his eyes is making them flash with amber. But I'm not afraid of his anger. A wolf can't hurt his mate. While I don't know much about how these bonds come to be, I know that there are lines he can't cross. Maybe when you deserve a thank you I will, I spit out. I don't hand out my gratitude to men who act like assholes when they get the first chance to do so. You can be as brash and hateful as you want, but I'm not putting up with your shit anymore. He chuckles and asks, and what are you going to do, Grace? Quit the program? That's not an option, is it? Are you going to skip my class? That's an option. But then you're throwing away a world-class education because you can't handle your own emotions. So tell me, what are you going to do? He's got me there. At this point, I don't have a plan. All I know is that as we're standing here screaming at each other, my chest is heaving with my breath, and I'm so angry and flustered and turned on all at once that I don't know what to do with myself. How long have you known? I ask him instead. Either he's playing dumb or he doesn't catch on at first. A muscle ticks in his jaw as he shakes his head like he can't believe I'm still talking. Known? What? Unlike your roommate, I'm not a fucking carnival sidekick. You can use your words. How long have you known that I'm your mate? I punch out each word slowly, so they sink in good and well through his thick fucking skull. All at once he's startled, his mouth falling open. How did you pieced it together? I answer. Since it's so inconvenient to save my life, I figure it can't really be a choice, now can it, Romulus? I wouldn't normally use his first name like this, but the power of it sends a thrilling jolt down my spine. Something flashes in his gaze, something I've never seen before. Part of him, a part he won't acknowledge, likes hearing it from my lips. You can't tell anyone, he says. You know that, right? This has to stay between us. The reason for your research is so we can break the bond and go about our separate lives. I know you'd undoubtedly prefer it that way. So would you? I sputter. You're always content to remind me what a waste of magic I am, what a waste of your time, whatever. I don't want to be tied forever to some guy 20 years my senior. 15 more like, he mumbles, who hates me and would rather see me dead than continue wasting time and energy on me. So, if it's all the same to you, you can just fuck off. Let me die next time. He seems so defeated, his eyes softening as he says, you know I can't do that, Grace. My heart would give out the moment yours did. I couldn't stop myself from saving you, but even if I could, I wouldn't let you die. No matter how angry you make me, no matter how much I think you try to get under my skin, I wouldn't let anything happen to you, wolf or not. I had a million other cruel things I was ready to launch at him, but none of them comes to mind now. If anything, my brain is just quiet, humming with the gravity of what he just said. Under the meanness is the truth. He cares. He cares far more than he'd like to admit, and he's just bared the weight of that to me. You've known from the start what I was to you, right? I ask. He nods to say, of course. The wolf knows immediately. Will others know? If we seal the bond, he says. Only then. There's no chance of that, right? I reply. I mean, that would mean you'd have to be attracted to me, and I you, and we'd have to, you know. What he does next shocks me. He laughs. He actually opens his mouth and laughs, covering his mouth and all, as though he can't believe what I just said to him. You can't say the word sex? He asks. Or fuck if you'd prefer. Are the grown-up words too much for you, baby? I was trying to be polite, I say hotly. I doubt my professor wants to hear me discuss fucking him. It's unthinkable. It's unfortunately not, he admits. The wolf would love nothing more than to kiss you, touch you, and claim you. In fact, whenever you're around, he can smell you before you tighten your legs. Warmth pools in my belly. The butterflies migrate lower to the parts of me he's describing. The worst part As his pupils dilate, I know he knows it too. He howls for it. He's aching for you all the time, and I can barely stop myself. I hate him. He's an asshole, a power-hungry monster who's part dog for gods. Sake. I shouldn't be having any physical response to his admission, and yet, my knees are feeling wobbly, and when I should be telling him to stop, all I can think is that I don't want him to. But even if I fuck you now, he says, stepping closer. Now we're inches apart, and I can smell the sweat and grass and wolf on him. So masculine. And so fucking hot, I'm not sure how I'm staying upright. Even if we do this here and I have my way with you, it wouldn't seal the bond. It's not the right time. This would just be for fun. He grips my hips, pulling me forward so that our bodies are flush. His skin is so hot, and now my heart is racing, beating at 100 miles an hour. He rubs slow circles on my waist with his thumbs in the space where my shorts and shirt don't touch. The way his rough skin feels on the soft parts of me is enough to give me goosebumps. You make me so frustrated, he says. You know that? You're an impossible fucking woman. I'm the impossible one? I feel like the entire term so far has consisted of me trying to decipher his mixed signals. He's more hot and cold than my house at the wrong time of the month, and yet, he acts as though I'm the confusing one, like I've made it my mission to be under his skin. If anything, it's the other way around. And you're an asshole. He chuckles again, almost humorless as he leans in, our mouths barely centimeters apart. And you're still mine. Finally, I can't take it anymore. It's like every impulse I've ever had crashes into me like a wave, and I knot my fingers in the hair at the nape of his neck and kiss him as hard as I can. Our mouths crush against each other, like the sea against the shore, and as much as the contact is a sweet relief, it's also a catalyst for a desire for something more. He grabs me around my hips, urging me into his arms. I wrap myself around him, my legs around his waist, his hands gripping my thighs as he fumbles for the front door of the cottage and brings us inside. We never stop kissing, our mouths and tongues twisting, electrified like a live wire. Holy hell. I know it's a bad idea, but I'm starting to wonder how it would feel to indulge desire for just one moment, one fleeting time we may allow ourselves to act on the attraction, satiate the urge. Please, I whimper. And yet I don't know what I'm begging for. Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Chapter 13. Paige doesn't know what happened between Professor Frey and me, but I think she can tell something is different when we show up for his class the next morning and he almost smiles at me. It would be dangerous for him to flash me a real smile, so understandably, he catches himself mid-act and pauses, but the flicker of it, the temptation to do it, flashes across his features for all of a second before he stops and turns back to the chalkboard. It's the way our eyes meet that I think startles me the most. It's a crackle of electricity, something that finds a spot in my chest and catches me off guard before I even have the chance to react. He looks at me for no longer than a couple of seconds, and in them I feel a flash of nervousness, affection, lust, and a desire to run. Bonds between an alpha wolf and his mate may elicit the sharing of emotions. I read that in a book last night, but only now am I starting to truly understand the gravity, the implication of what that actually means. Does that mean he can feel my emotions too? I don't even know what's going on in my mind, so the idea that he could pick up on it is terrifying. What the hell? No, we kissed, but strengthening a mating bond would require a lot more than just kissing, wouldn't it? I'm left wondering what this all means, but nothing comes to mind. All I have are questions. Paige and I find our usual seats near the back of the lecture hall. I try to beg the color in my cheeks to vanish, awkwardly shuffling my books and papers around with a frown. Paige, did we have homework? I printed yours too, she says. Remember you emailed it? You must have been pretty hungover after the party. Honestly, you were acting kind of weird when you came back. Did you hook up with somebody? Your auras. She waves her hands vaguely. Different. Different how? She laughs. You can wipe the panicked look off your face. I just meant that. You seem happier. I hear a good lay will do that. And what about you? I ask. She plays it cool. What about me? The vamp girl. Did you know? She rolls her eyes. I'll tell you when you tell me. Deal. Fine, I say. But I think you owe me a story one of these days. Maybe when you tell me why you're all blushy around Professor Frey. She replies. I know every straight girl here wants to sleep with the guy, but Thought you weren't a cliché like them. I mean, he's just a guy. Maybe to them that's true. To me he's my mate. Accordingly to all the lore. We should be screwing each other's brains out under the moon. That's the last thing I'm interested in, given that he's my professor, and half the time I'm not even sure we like each other. Tolerate maybe. Share a passive interest. Sure. But anything we could build a relationship out of would require genuine, positive feelings. I'm pretty sure we're sorely lacking in those. It's probably just that he saved my life. That kind of thing makes a girl feel all kinds of stuff, I insist. I'm sure he'll open his mouth and I'll forget all about it. Before she can reply, Frey starts lecturing. I couldn't repeat the contents of this lecture for the life of me. Even as it's happening, my mind is in other places. I keep looking down at the book for his other assignment stuffed under my notes. Werewolf bonds. I know neither of us want to be bound to each other for the next lifetime, but there's something about his insistence about the research that feels amiss. Paige elbows me sharply in the middle of the lesson. I glance up from the pages of the book, the pen slipping out of my mouth. One look at the front of the room reveals Professor Frey is staring at me expectantly, and judging by my tittering classmates and the fact several sets of eyes are locked on me. Now he's just asked me something. Oh, could you maybe repeat the question? I ask, my cheeks burning. I must have missed it. He rolls his eyes, adjusting his sleeves. I was asking you if you could tell me the year the National Coven of Witchery was founded, since your family, the Sumners, aided in founding it. But I see you're too busy to pay attention. The answer is 1776. He moves on instead of reading me the riot act, which I appreciate given his history of publicly shaming me in front of large groups of people. What I don't expect is for a piece of parchment to slide out of the borrowed library book in between chapters. In his handwriting it says my office after class. I'm not sure how he even got it in there, but he seems to have been very intentional about it, because he nods ever so slightly at me when our eyes meet once more before the end of the lesson. There's something about Professor Frey that makes me wonder. He seems to have some impressive magic skills for someone who isn't a warlock, but maybe it's all sleight of hand. I shouldn't be thinking too much about him. At the end of the day, he's just a passing face in my life, so why am I so focused on the littlest movements from him? Paige seems relieved on my behalf that I don't get called on for the rest of the lesson. I'm sure I flunked the short pop quiz he gives us at the end, and as I'm dropping my answers off on our way out the door, I make up some excuse about discussing my extra credit paper. The rest of the students funnel out of the classroom, and now Professor Frey and I are face to face. All of the blood rushes in my ears. My heart seems to be pounding at 1,000 miles an hour as he shuts the lecture hall door very slowly. My office adjoins this room, he explains, leading me over to a door positioned between the sprawling blackboards and the large windows. We can talk privately there. Privately? This is definitely about the bond, then. His office isn't what I expected from him. In the way that his apartment is organized to a science, I would have expected his office to look a lot like that. Instead, there's a mess of books and loose papers, some pinned to his own private corkboard. I feel like I'm standing inside of his brain, watching thoughts collide and come to life in the walls around me. There are even more volumes of history books, but there are gaps on the shelf, presumably because they're sitting open on every surface possible. I try to hide my surprise. Wow, it's a little messy in here, don't you think? He shrugs. I meant to clean, just didn't get around to it. I sit down on the arm of one of the chairs, the material of my skirt pooling over it, and watch him as he paces for a few moments like he can't quite figure out how to make himself comfortable. He scrubs a hand over his face. Are you okay, Professor? No response. Rome, I say at last. Are you okay? He shakes his head. I have something to confess, and I'm not sure how you'll take it, but it needs to be said because it feels wrong to have you work on this project and not know the truth. I feel like the air has been sucked out of my chest. When I exhale, it's a more ragged sound, shaky with the weight of anticipation. I wring my hands out on the edge of my sweater, daring to finally ask, what is it? There's a prophecy about our bond, he says. I wasn't going to tell you, but near the start of the term, your friend Paige showed up to the library in a trance and told me that if I don't seal the bond, or should I say if we don't seal the bond by the eclipse, one of us will die. The obvious solution comes to mind. Obviously, fucking my professor isn't exactly my plan for the academic session, but if the difference between life and death is a little sex magic, surely it's not the end of the world. Then, again, judging by the look on his face, maybe it isn't as simple as just having sex. I assume, especially after the steamy as hell kiss we had yesterday, that sex wouldn't be too much of a leap. So why can't we seal the bond? I ask him. I mean, sure, we don't want to be tied together divinely and all that magical mumbo-jumbo, but that doesn't mean we're not two adults who can figure it out. I'm sure sleeping together beats dying, doesn't it? He nods. If it were that easy, I wouldn't be so concerned. Problem is that to seal a bond, we have to be madly, deeply, and irrecoverably in love. The intention behind the magic is what makes it possible. I've been intent on breaking it because we're about as incompatible as two people can get. Figured I couldn't continue to leave you in the dark, though. You have every right to know something that concerns you this deeply. I can't decide if I'm terrified now that I'm hearing it, pissed that he never told me in the first place, or somewhere in the middle with my feelings running amok. Whatever it is, I can't figure it out. All I know is that it's a lot all at once, and it isn't fair that he's expecting me to just process it all instantly. So we'll find a way to break the bond, I say. I'm sure historically there's been wolves who are bonded to someone they don't want to mate with. Just because destiny thinks we'd be a good match doesn't make it true. We can't be the first people who weren't interested in their mating bond. He crosses his arms over his chest, leaning against his massive mahogany shelf. Right. And Paige has no idea she gave you that prophecy? I ask. He shakes his head. She came out of it pretty disoriented. I know she's been honing her divination skills. A lot of times a first prophecy a witch delivers is remembered by everyone except the one channeling it. I've never envied your kind for that reason. Sometimes it seems like your magic makes choices for you. My sisters always said that, I reply. Admittedly, I've never connected to my magic enough to know. I'm not even sure what my gifts are. I only know that you managed to bring them out once. You're more talented than you think, he assures me. There's a lot of potential energy surrounding you everywhere you go. I wouldn't be surprised if you grew into your powers and gained a reputation for yourself. You just have to believe it's possible. You know, for someone who has a reputation as an asshole, you're actually much nicer than you give yourself credit for. Better be careful. Someone might figure out that you're not a massive prick. I'm not sure joking around is the answer, but the tension in the room seems to be rising, and I'd rather not be thinking about my imminent death when I've only just figured out how to use my magic anyway. He cracks a smile. I think I'd prefer it if you kept my supposed good side between us, seeing as I do have a reputation to uphold. Right. It's not that he isn't a good-looking man. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think he's attractive. His eyes are so green they almost look unreal, and they seem to be mixed with different colors. Every time I look at him, I feel like I'm seeing something new. He's got a cut jawline, more scars than I can count. And yet, even with his hardened edges, he's all kinds of sexy. His perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and his height only make him more tall, dark, and handsome. And he wears it a little too well to be a professor. Do you have another class today? I ask him. He shakes his head. Not for another couple of hours. Lunch break. Right. There's a flicker of mischief in the way he looks at me. Why? Because thinking about how hot you are made me want to kiss you. I was just thinking that maybe we could do more research about the bond, I say. I have to force my brain to stop thinking about the way his mouth feels or the way his jaw scratches against my skin when he kisses my neck. Physical attraction isn't enough to save us from fate, so we'll have to be smart about this if we want to survive. Okay, he says. All right, I say. I make a move to grab my backpack, but I never actually get it off the ground. Instead, I'm too busy staring at him, wondering what he's thinking about all of this. Nothing is simple about a werewolf's bond, and especially for alpha wolves who lead their packs and dictate everything for all the other wolves. I can't imagine his burden, or mine as his mate. My place, he says. We'll head back to mine and get to work. And we do. Of course, it would be a little unusual if we walked together, so I leave first and take the long way down the historic hallway that runs through the main academic building and wander down the grassy hill toward the woods, where his cottage is. I don't mean to wander, but the deeper I get into the trees, my fingers brushing against the plants, the more I feel the hum of nature, the potential Magic was always quiet to me, especially as a little girl. Now it grows louder with each movement, each way I turn. When I finally get to the cottage, he's waiting for me with a couple of sandwiches from the cafeteria. I suppose my little detour must have taken longer than I expected, if he had time to get something to eat first. I picked up your mail, by the way, he says. Thorn caught me as I was leaving and passed it along. The stack of letters is from my mom mostly. I didn't even know we could get mail at the academy, but she's made short work of our time without cell service and written me a fair few of letters about home. What catches me off guard is the one from Stassi. It's simple, but it's enough to harden me against her, make anger sharpen as a knife under my ribs. You don't belong there was all she wrote. I'm going to do everything I can to prove her wrong. Thankfully I have a really good teacher.